In today's economy, more people than ever are looking to buy and sell businesses. But how do you do it? Welcome to the Deal Board, presented by Transworld Business Advisors. Straight talk about real deals and real people. Listen to stories, interviews, and expert advice to help your business sale, merger, or acquisition process. Now, here are your business exit experts, Andy and Jessica.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Deal Board. And we have a great one today because I just got done with a fun project that I've been working on for years, and I decided to write an article about it. And people always ask me, Jessica, they must ask you, it's like, how do you get all this stuff done? How do you do these hard things in your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Sometimes, honestly, Andy, I ask you that question a lot, right? Like with your latest project, like, how do you get everything done? But I think that one, there's a mindset around tackling hard projects and tackling hard things really in life. And there's a mindset and desire to want to do that. And then there are some strategies. So today we thought we would share two examples from each of our personal lives of a hard thing that we've tackled in the past, why we did it, how we did it through some of those strategies, and also the benefits that we got from doing that. So Andy, why don't you start by sharing, because you just wrapped up a big, hard project. So why don't you share that with our listeners?
Yeah. So several years ago, I used to be in the music industry. I think I've talked about it here before. It was just such a fun time in my life. Yes, I used to have long hair, used to reach my my shoulders at least. Right. So, and I decided to write a musical based on some of the stories that I had. And my daughter is a kind of a theater kid, and she grew up and she pursuing her theater career. And so I told her one day, I said, I have a really good idea for a musical. And she's like, that's a good idea. So I wrote it down, and that's the other thing you should do in your life, right? Just kind of jot things down that you want to do. And jotting that down, I literally woke up in the middle of the night, couldn't go to sleep thinking about the story. So I wrote it down, and then I just continued to write, and I wrote a lot of music. And through some happenstance where I had somebody over my house that we were playing some music. My wife mentioned that I had done this, and the person, Steve, my now partner in the musical, said, "Hey, I write music, and do you have the music?" And I said, "No, I have the lyrics and the story." So it was kind of like chocolate and peanut butter. We put it together, and we started in 2019. So of course, then the pandemic hits, and we were so kind of lucky. I mean, I wonder how many projects out there started because of the pandemic, but I bet a lot. So we were able to do a lot of recordings. My daughter was home. It was great. And so it just kept going from there. We just kept, at the project and what was the next step. And we'll talk about all that. But it was really rewarding to get to do something that very few people do. I mean, I think you've had examples like that in your life.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a few different examples. And actually, one thing that I loved that you brought up, Andy, is just putting down the ideas to paper. So I have an idea journal, and my husband jokes with me because I like to start projects and new businesses and things like that. So we have this rule that I have to write it down in my idea journal. It has to sit there for 6 months before I take any action, right? So it can't be squirrel brain. But I think sometimes in your story, what really came to fruition is about the right time to do things, right? So I'll talk about a different example, but one thing that I've been working on for a while is you're familiar, but we had this dog named Sailor. And before we had children, Sailor was our child, and Sailor went everywhere with us, right? He visited 48 states and 8 Canadian provinces. So in my idea journal for the last probably 7 or 8 years, I've had a children's series called Sailor the Traveling Dog, of Sailor the Traveling Dog books. And this is like a right time thing. And so I haven't been able to sit down and figure out what the stories are. Is it multiple books? Is it one book? Well, recently my son has been asking me about Sailor stories. So at night, I will tell him a sailor story and I'll say, where does sailor go? And he'll say, sailor goes skiing, sailor goes to the beach, right? And so now these stories are forming organically. But so that's not the one I was going to talk about today, but I just thought it was really important that you brought up like, hey, I just had this idea, I jotted it down, and then things happened in your life. You had the right conversation, you had the right opportunity through the pandemic. Like sometimes these big projects, you don't need to force them, you need to let them kind of, marinate for a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I think at the bottom line is that we push ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't know what that mindset is, but I think it's really important. We'll talk about the benefits of that, but there are several strategies that you can have to try to tackle some of these really hard projects because they're journeys. It's not something that you do and it's going to be done, which is probably one of the hardest things to put on your to-do list, right? Something that's going to take months, years. But I think it's really important. So I think the first thing that, we did was when we started actually creating this, we decided to seek out some mentors and some experts. And there's, and it was invaluable. I mean, people were telling us, and I have to say, like experts, we found some like really kind of almost famous people or people that have worked on some famous projects, but they were all really supportive in telling us that this is how it happens. It just people do things like this, and it starts, simply. You think of Harry Potter and all those kind of things that were created by someone who was just had an idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the experts and the mentors are important. So the example I was going to weave through our strategy today is, it's been a few years, but I embarked on running marathons years ago. So this is probably around like 2014 through 2018. And of course, I started with a goal with running one of the hardest marathons in the country, right? And because why not? And at that time, I was running maybe 5Ks at the most. But the first thing I did is I seeked out a running coach. We were living in Denver at the time, so there's a lot of people that do that. So an expert or a mentor that kind of put me on the right path, saying, "Hey, Jess, you can't go from running a 5K to one of the country's hardest marathons. Like you don't just make that jump, right?" But I think you can find an expert, mentor, colleague in any aspect of your life related to any type of big project, whether it's creative or health or business. Someone's been there and done that before you, and you can learn a lot through their experiences without having to make all of the mistakes yourself along the way.
Yeah, and they'll give you the motivation and the guidance and the insight and some of the obstacles that you're going to get along the way because again, this is an educational process. And there's plenty of places that you can go out and get education today because, I mean, the internet has just opened things up for everybody. We were just talking about it yesterday about, things like having maps or being able to research things, or we actually used to leave a conversation arguing about something and not knowing what the answer was. And now you could just Google it on your phone. But YouTube is rich with free educational videos, just about everything.
Yeah. I mean, you've got YouTube, you've got influencers, you've got online courses, curriculums. I mean, there's online courses and curriculums, everything from like, I used a running coach, but now there's running schools, there's technology that you can clip on your wrist and it can tell you about your VO2 max and everything like that. But I mean, there's schools and programs for everything now, free, paid. It's really, I think that's actually a creation of the pandemic. Like that industry just blew up for online education during that time period. So, yeah.
Agreed. I mean, during the pandemic, what I did was I took lessons on how to engineer songs, like how to use, I had for years, I had Pro Tools and eventually wound up with Studio One, which is recording software. And it's very complicated. So I took some lessons and it was a great thing. And I think I found them either on Fiverr or Upwork and you could find all these people. So I used, several experts, not only to learn how to do it, but then I had engineers and we had performers that we all got from online databases where people would do things and record music in their homes and send it to us, and we'd piece it all together. And we had an engineer. It was fantastic. And then we decided, hey, when we finally had a work that we felt like we wanted to try it out, the next thing you could do is go out, and there's industry groups a lot of times and conferences. So we went to a conference in Fort Worth, Texas, about writing musicals.
Yeah, I remember you were here for that. And that feels like that wasn't that long ago, right? But it's the same thing as like using those resources around you. So we started with experts, mentors, and you've got online education. Now you're embracing the community that you need to be a part in for this thing to succeed. And I think conferences, there's, again, if we go back to online, Facebook groups for everything. And there's some really active communities around certain topics, certain passions, certain projects that you can get just a wealth of information and connections too that you'll need to pull off your project. Like that I'm sure you had to have all kinds of connections that you met at that conference and information that you wouldn't have had because that's not typically the world you live in, right?
Yeah, something about a conference that brings out the best in people of sharing ideas. Maybe they wouldn't normally spend the time and sit down with you. But those conferences are great, and highly recommend going to a conference of any industry. We've learned tons from the International Business Brokers Association and going there. And it's not necessarily the workshop sometimes. Sometimes it's, having dinner with people and meeting them for the cocktail parties or whatever. So, that's number one, is to get educated and get advice. But you still have this huge project in front of you. So what's another strategy that'll help you along the way?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that you can't look at it like a big project, right? If we use mine as the stereotypical running a marathon, you can't look at, I've got to run 26 miles over 48 hills, right? Like you can't look at that. You have to break it down into smaller pieces and milestones. So you have little wins along the way. And I think if you put a lot of effort actually into formulating that plan of breaking it down, chunking it down into smaller pieces, smaller milestones, you set yourself up for success. Because I think when the human brain looks at something, and like if you look at the musical and you look at, I've got to get a musical on Broadway, like the human brain shuts down because there's too many things that you have to overcome, that you have to accomplish to get there. But if it's as simple as, I have to write one song, maybe that's a little bit easier to accomplish. Don't you think, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. You break it down into little pieces. Maybe it's write one song a month, or, again, you have time. I mean, some of these projects can be years in the making, and you've heard that before. Even running a marathon, I mean, they actually have logbooks that you could use, or you can keep a Trello or a Slack, or, doing something, especially if you're working with other people, Slack or Trello. We use a Trello board for this podcast that we keep track of the things that we need to do. So keeping a to-do list and making assignments of those small chunks of what you need to get done and manageable tasks, and then celebrate those tasks.
Yeah. Have fun along the way. I mean, I think, both of the examples we're talking about today, and I think what we're hoping to inspire for you is tackling hard things and projects that are going to add value and fun to your life, right? So if you're not having fun through the process, through the journey, you're probably not going to have that much fun at the end either, right? Because it's more, what's the quote? It's more about the journey rather than the destination. So,
yeah, it's absolutely all about the journey. We had a blast through this journey, and there was certainly some difficult moments. But it's not just about, and the benefits of this is not just about achieving goals. Like you said, it is about the journey, and it really teaches you a lot of things. I mean, I think several things that I could talk about. Number one, it talks about resilience. I can't strive enough that being a business owner or doing anything hard in your life, you have to be able to work until you're weary. You have to be resilient, even through some of the toughest times. And I think this teaches you to do that, right?
yeah, it teaches you to do that. And I think it also, like, one of the other benefits that's related to that is it teaches you to overcome failure, right? So, which is kind of resilience. But I think there's also this part about a fear of failure that a lot of people have, that when you're tackling something big and hard, and I mean, outside your comfort zone, we can talk about that too. You have to face this fear of failure, and you have to get over it and be more resilient, right? Because there is going to be parts of this journey you're going to fail on, and you're going to have to learn from it.
I think one of the biggest things in success is learning how to fail,
Yeah.
learning how to fail and learning how to take responsibility for failure. I think that's huge. I think being able to raise your hand, I'm in another situation right now I can't talk about much, but where the person who's being criticized just refuses to raise their hand and say, my bad. And I think like half the problems would go away. So, part of learning how to fail is having problem solving skills, because a lot of failure can be, you could head it off at the pass if you get there early enough, or if you have some good problem solving skills, or even turning failure into a success. We've seen that so many times.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like every success, if you think about it, every success has failures along the way, right? And I think if you look at your successes and you're like, no, there was no failure in there, like you're really just lying to yourself. There was many failures along the way. And I think when we were talking about this process and big projects that take a long time, like it's almost like inundating yourself with many failures to get over that fear, right?
Yeah, I think again, I just gave a speech like literally an hour ago, and we were talking about failure, and we're talking about how important it is to teach your kids to fail. They shouldn't always win at the game. I know sometimes they get upset when you're playing a little kid and you let them win, but sometimes you got to show them failure, and they got to learn from their failure, and they got to learn to be gracious in failure. I think it just teaches you perseverance. It gives you the ability to adapt. We talk about pivoting all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another benefit that we're kind of dancing around here is, and we both brought up examples from our life that wasn't directly related to what we do for a living professionally. And I think, part of this conversation is it could be a big, hard project that you want to tackle professionally, but it could be, writing or some other creative activity or health activity. But I think the other big benefit when you're doing something like that is you're getting outside of your comfort zone, and you're exposing yourself to a new world, a new community, a new profession a lot of the times. And there's so many benefits that cross over into your personal and professional lives from getting outside of your comfort zone. And we talked about learning something new, but this is just learning a new world, really.
Yeah, it certainly teaches you to embrace diversity. I mean, here I am, a business person, entrepreneur, capitalist inside of a rehearsal studio with young actors who are people who are, of a creative minds, ADD. I mean, and not to say that all creatives are ADD.
I was going to say,
ADD,
it does sound like a lot of similar issues entrepreneurs have, though, too.
Yeah. We're all ADD. But, but it was very interesting to learn from them. And I will tell you that the biggest experts in fields are usually the most empathetic and welcoming people. Again, we had a fantastic director that we worked with. We had one or two actors that were very seasoned actors. At the conference, I met with somebody who's written many Broadway plays and has been a success. And they've been so gracious and so welcoming and encouraging. So I think that, I've learned a lot from this process. It's almost given me more than I'll ever give it, kind of thing. But, I think it's a part of being a good business person is, like you said, to embrace things that are tough.
Yeah. So we wanted to bring this to the podcast because one, Andy just celebrated this huge success and milestone with the Broadway play, but it really inspired us to follow up from, we had a previous podcast about hard work. And now we wanted to really talk about doing hard things and hope to inspire some of our listeners to tackle that hard project that's been sitting on your idea list, whether that's buying a business or starting a business or writing a book or writing a musical, running a marathon, whatever it is.
Yeah, we've done both those things. We've both written books, and you have another project on its way. And I would just encourage everybody not to have paralysis by analysis. Don't overanalyze. Everybody that I've met that have done tough things always say through the process that they made so many mistakes along the way, and if they could go back, they would do things differently. But I think people who get things done, who do really hard things, aren't, understand that they're going to make mistakes and don't try to be perfect. So don't try to be perfect.
You can't. It's impossible, right?
It is.
Yeah. So here's to inspiring you, and we hope to hear about your big projects and your big accomplishments in the future. But like always, we've got a great deal of the week lined up for you and a great listing of the week that hopefully if one of those projects is to buy a business and inspires you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So get out there and do the hard things, folks.
Hey, Jessica, you know what time it is?
Money time?
Almost. It's time for listing of the week.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We are live at the IBBA, but we're talking deals, and it's a listing of the week. So Fernando Mello from Transworld Business Advisors of South Florida. Fernando, you have a nice listing that you want to talk about today. Tell us about it.
That's true. I have a 15 years old fine pastry bakery in Miami that does wholesale for the finest and highest end hotels, banquet mansions, banquet houses, cruises and all that, and also retail at the same time. They have 23 employees. They have a cash flow this year projected for $1 million, and it's selling for only $2 million. So with SBA pre-qualified financing and seller financing as well.
Right. And the seller's willing to stick around and train somebody?
Oh, yeah. The seller is a very experienced pastry chef, and she's willing to stay as a consultant or facilitate a transition over 6 months to 1 year.
That's great. So what's the best way to get in touch with you if somebody wants to learn more?
Well, my number is 561-609-7371. That's 561-609-7371. My email is fmello with double L at theworld.com.
Excellent. Great listing. Get it soon, folks.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Hey, Andy, do you know what time it is? It's time for our deal of the week.
Deal of the week.
Sold.
Okay, we're back. It is Deal of the Week, and I have Rupesh Berard here from Transworld Business Advisors, Virginia, Maryland. RVA is best known as. And Rupesh, you just closed a nice deal. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. And I think this was a deal that I'm so proud that I can share. This is a franchise sign location of Signorama. 35-year-old sign franchise location owned by a single owner.
Wow.
The challenges were in terms of transition from the current owner to new owner. Really good business, couple of $1 million in sales, really profitable business, lots of training and licensing involved.
Right.
The deal size was in north of $1.3 million.
Right.
So it requires financing, it requires franchise approval, it requires the buyer training and transitioning, having structure between buyer and seller.
Great. So the deal was a great deal and you got it done. What's the best way to get in touch with you if somebody else wants to buy something, sell something like that?
Absolutely. You can call me on my direct cell phone number, 804-835-6363. And we can have a confidential discussion. You can email me. My first name is Rupesh, RUPESH @tworlds.com.
Excellent. Thanks, Rupesh.
Thank you so much, Ruby.
Thanks for tuning into the show today. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends on social media. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcasting app. If you have questions, would like to appear, or have suggestions for topics for the show, get in contact with us through our website, thedealboardpodcast.com.